Hi, welcome to the Aftermath Tales. Ready for a new story? Very well, let's begin.
Have you ever had that moment when your entire world crumbles in a single instant? When everything you thought you knew about the people you love turns out to be a lie? My name is Miranda Smith Thomas, and I'm about to tell you the story of the most devastating betrayal I've ever experienced. One that came from the two people I trusted most in this world. 2 years ago, I married Warren Thomas, the love of my life. He's a manager at a car dealership downtown, charming with customers and gentle with me. We'd been trying to start a family almost immediately after our wedding, and though it took longer than we'd hoped, we never gave up believing it would happen. Then one evening, everything changed. It was a Tuesday when my sister Rosie knocked on our door. She stood there in the rain with a baby carrier in her arms and tears streaming down her face. "Miranda," she whispered, "I have nowhere else to go." Rosie is my younger sister by 3 years. She works as a teller at First National Bank and has always been the free spirit of our family. Impulsive, adventurous, sometimes irresponsible. Inside that carrier was the most beautiful 5-month-old baby girl I'd ever seen. "She's mine," Rosie explained through her tears. "Kate Smith. The father, he doesn't want anything to do with us. I lost my job, I lost my apartment, I can barely afford formula, and I don't know what to do." Warren and I didn't hesitate. We set up the guest room for Rosie and turned our spare room into a nursery for Kate. Watching Warren's face light up when he held that baby for the first time, it was like watching a man discover something he didn't know he'd been missing. And me? I fell in love with Kate instantly. For 3 weeks, we settled into a new routine. Rosie helped with household chores, I got to experience caring for a baby, and Warren seemed genuinely happy having them both there. Then I noticed I was late, very late. I'd been so busy adjusting to life with Kate and Rosie that I hadn't really paid attention to my cycle. But when I realized I'd missed my period completely, my heart started racing. I had pregnancy test kits. I'd bought them in bulk during our years of trying, hoping each month would be the month. The test was positive. I stared at those 2 pink lines for what felt like forever, hardly daring to believe it. After all this time, after we'd almost given up hope, it was finally happening. I was pregnant. I practically floated downstairs to share the news. Warren was in the living room reading while Rosie fed Kate on the couch, the picture of domestic bliss. "Warren," I said, barely able to contain my excitement. "Rosie, I have something to tell you both." They looked up at me expectantly. "I'm pregnant," I announced, grinning so wide my cheeks hurt. The reactions weren't what I'd expected. Warren's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, confusion, something that almost looked like panic, before settling into what seemed like forced happiness. That's wonderful, honey," he said, standing to hug me, but his embrace felt stiff, distracted. Rosie looked completely stunned, her eyes wide as she stared at me. For a moment, she seemed frozen, Kate's bottle halfway to the baby's mouth. "Rosie?" I prompted. "Isn't it exciting? Kate's going to have a little cousin." She blinked, seeming to snap back to reality. "Oh, yes, of course. Congratulations, Miranda. That's amazing news." But something felt off about her response, and Warren kept running his hand through his hair, something he only did when he was nervous or stressed. "Let me go check on Kate," Rosie said suddenly, even though Kate seemed perfectly content. "I think she needs changing." She hurried out of the room, leaving Warren and me alone. "Are you okay?" I asked him. "You seem, I don't know, I thought you'd be happier." "I am happy," he said quickly. "Just surprised. We'd been trying for so long, and now with Rosie and Kate here, it's a lot to process." "Good surprised, though?" I pressed. "Of course," he said, kissing my forehead. Of course it's good. But I couldn't shake the feeling that both their reactions had been wrong somehow. The next day, I went to my doctor to confirm what the home test had told me. 4 weeks pregnant. Everything looked perfect. Due date in early spring. The doctor was optimistic and gave me all the usual first trimester advice. I drove home feeling like I was floating on air, already planning how to tell Warren's parents, thinking about nursery themes, imagining our little family growing from 3 to 4, well, 6, counting Rosie and Kate. For 3 weeks, I lived in that beautiful bubble of early pregnancy joy. I hadn't started showing yet, barely had any symptoms beyond some mild fatigue, but I felt this incredible sense of purpose and excitement. Then came the worst day of my life. I decided to make beef stew for dinner, comfort food for a chilly evening. I'd been cooking all afternoon, letting it simmer slowly, filling the house with rich, savory smells. The pregnancy fatigue had been hitting me harder that day, so after finishing the stew, I decided to take a quick nap before Warren got home from work. I should mention that I have a severe peanut allergy, severe enough that even trace amounts can send me to the hospital. Everyone in my family knows this. It's been a constant in my life since childhood, reading every label, asking about ingredients, carrying an EpiPen everywhere. When I woke up from my nap, Warren was already home, and Rosie had returned with Kate from their afternoon walk. The three of us sat down for dinner together, a cozy family meal with the stew I'd spent all afternoon preparing, which is why what happened next made no sense. The reaction started within minutes. My lips tingled, my throat tightened, and the air around me seemed suddenly too thin to breathe. My hands shook as I clawed for my EpiPen, stabbing it into my thigh. The rush of adrenaline barely broke through the panic. My chest burned, hives spread across my arms, and then came the cramping. Not just pain, but sharp, gut-wrenching agony that twisted deep inside me, a warning I didn't want to understand. I stumbled, knocking the bowl of stew to the floor. My vision blurred. Warren's voice was frantic in the distance, the shrill edge of a phone call cutting through my fading awareness. Then, nothing. When I woke again, it was to the antiseptic brightness of a hospital room. The steady beeping of machines anchored me to reality, though every part of me still felt heavy, sluggish, drained. Warren was there, gripping my hand as if he could hold me together by sheer force of will. For a moment, I believed the worst had passed. I had survived. My baby had survived, but then the truth came, slow and merciless. The allergic reaction had been too severe, the strain on my body too great. My baby was gone. I lost my child that night, and with it, a piece of myself I would never recover. The medical team explained that severe allergic reactions can cause such trauma to the body that they can trigger miscarriage. The stress, the medication needed to save my life, the shock to my system, it was all too much for my baby to survive. I don't understand, I kept saying to the doctors, to Warren, to anyone who would listen. How could there have been peanuts in my stew? I made it myself. I was so careful. The doctors suggested maybe there's a cross-contamination. Maybe a cutting board or utensil that had been used for something containing peanuts. These things happen, they said, even to the most careful people. But I knew my kitchen. I knew my habits. I'd been vigilant about my allergy for years. How could I have made such a fatal mistake? Warren held me as I sobbed in that hospital bed, both of us grieving the child we'd never meet. And Rosie? Rosie was devastated when she found out. She cried with me, held me, told me how sorry she was for our loss. I can't believe this happened, she kept saying. After you were so happy about the pregnancy, it's not fair. No, it wasn't fair. None of it was fair. I spent weeks in a dark depression, barely able to function. Warren took time off work to care for me, and Rosie was incredibly supportive, helping around the house, taking care of Kate when I couldn't be around the baby, who reminded me of what I'd lost. The guilt was almost as crushing as the grief. How had I been so careless? How had I contaminated my own food? The questions tormented me, but there were no answers. Slowly, very slowly, I began to heal. Warren was patient and loving, never pushing me to talk when I wasn't ready, and Rosie, having her and Kate there, actually helped. Kate's innocent presence reminded me that life goes on, that there could still be joy even after devastating loss. 1 month ago, I finally felt like I might be ready to try again, ready to think about the future instead of dwelling in the past. I thought we were healing together as a family. I thought having Rosie and Kate with us was helping us all move forward. But I was wrong about so many things, because what I discovered about Warren, Rosie, and little Kate would reveal that nothing, absolutely nothing, was what it seemed. The first sign something was off happened on a Thursday morning, about 1 month after I'd finally started feeling like myself again. I was getting ready for work. I'm a quality inspector at Madison Manufacturing when Rosie came into the kitchen with Kate on her hip. Miranda, she said, bouncing Kate gently, do you think Warren could drive me to Kate's pediatrician appointment today? My car's making that noise again. Before I could even open my mouth to respond, Warren appeared from behind his newspaper, already reaching for his keys from the counter. What time? He asked, not even looking at me for confirmation. I paused, coffee cup halfway to my lips. Warren never volunteered for errands without checking with me first, especially during work hours. Don't you have that client meeting with the Hendersons at 2? I asked. I can reschedule, he said quickly. Too quickly. Something cold flickered in my chest, but I pushed it down. Warren was just being helpful. That's who he was, the kind of man who'd drop everything to help family. But then I started noticing other things, like how they'd be talking quietly in the living room when I came home from work, their voices low and intimate, but the moment I walked in, they'd spring apart and suddenly be discussing something completely mundane. We were just talking about Kate's feeding schedule, Rosie would say with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, or how at dinner Rosie would laugh at Warren's jokes, really laugh, with this musical sound I'd never heard from her before. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting there confused because I hadn't found anything particularly funny about Warren's comment about the weather. What's so amusing, I'd ask. Oh, nothing, Rosie would say, still giggling. Warren just has this way of putting things. Since when? In all the years Warren and I had been together and all the years I'd known my sister, I'd never seen her find him particularly hilarious. But the thing that really started to gnaw at me was how Warren was with Kate. Don't get me wrong, I loved seeing him bond with the baby. After losing our own child, watching him care for Kate felt healing in a way. But there was something different about how he held her, how he looked at her. It wasn't just uncle-like affection. When Kate cried, he'd be up before Rosie could even move. He knew exactly how she liked to be rocked, exactly what temperature to make her bottle. He'd talk to her in this soft voice, and sometimes I'd catch him calling her Daddy's little girl when he thought no one was listening. The first time I heard him say that, I froze in the hallway outside the nursery. Daddy's little girl, not Uncle Warren's little girl. Daddy's... I told myself I was overthinking it. Warren had always been nurturing. It made sense that he'd be paternal with Kate, especially given our loss. Maybe calling himself Daddy was just his way of practicing for when we tried again. But then I caught him one evening, sitting in the nursery with Kate after she'd fallen asleep. He wasn't just watching her. He was studying her face with this intense expression, like he was memorizing every detail, like he was looking at something that belonged to him. When he noticed me in the doorway, he startled. She's so peaceful when she sleeps, he said, carefully placing her back in the crib. She is, I agreed. You're really good with her, Warren. You're going to be an amazing father someday. Something flickered across his face. Guilt? Sadness? Fear? It was gone before I could identify it. I hope so, he said quietly. The secretive conversations continued. Little inside jokes I wasn't part of. Shared glances across the dinner table that seemed to carry entire conversations. Warren volunteering to run errands with Rosie and Kate, always with some reasonable excuse about needing to stop by the store anyway or having to drive in that direction for work. I started coming home during my lunch breaks, telling myself I just wanted to see Kate. But really, I was checking, looking for what? I didn't even know. One afternoon, I found Warren's car in the driveway when it shouldn't have been. I walked in to find him sitting on the living room floor with Kate, who was propped up against his legs, gurgling happily while he made silly faces at her. "You're home early," I said. "Slow day at the lot," he replied, not looking up from Kate. Figured I'd help Rosie out. She seemed tired. Where was Rosie? I looked around and found her in the kitchen, making what looked like Warren's favorite sandwich, the complicated one with 3 different kinds of meat that she'd never bothered to learn how to make before. "That's sweet of you to make lunch for Warren," I said. She blushed. Actually blushed. "He's been so helpful with Kate. It's the least I can do." Since when did my sister blush about making sandwiches? That night, as Warren and I got ready for bed, I tried to bring up what I'd been noticing. "Warren, can I ask you something?" "Of course." He was brushing his teeth, his words muffled by toothpaste. Do you think Rosie seems different lately? He spat and rinsed before answering, taking longer than necessary. Different how? I don't know. Happier, maybe? More comfortable around you? She's probably just relieved to have help with Kate. Being a single mom can't be easy. Right? I said. Of course. But as he climbed into bed beside me and turned off the light, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. There was something building in my house, something I couldn't name but could definitely feel. And underneath my growing suspicion was a more disturbing thought, one I'd been trying to push away for days. Kate's eyes. They were Warren's eyes. The same unusual shade of green, the same shape. I'd noticed it from the first day Rosie brought her home, but I'd dismissed it as coincidence. Now I wasn't so sure it was coincidence at all. I should have known something was wrong when I saw Warren's car in the driveway at 3:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. My shift at Madison Manufacturing had been cut short due to a machinery malfunction, and I'd decided to surprise my family by coming home early. Maybe we could all take Kate to the park, I thought. It was such a beautiful day. Warren's silver sedan sat in our driveway where it definitely shouldn't have been. He never got home before 5 on weekdays, but I wasn't immediately suspicious. Maybe he was feeling sick, or maybe they'd had another slow day. I grabbed my purse and headed for the front door, already planning what I'd say. Surprise! Who wants to go feed the ducks? But the moment I stepped inside, I heard it. Voices arguing and Kate crying, that frustrated, tired cry that meant she needed comfort. The voices were coming from down the hall, from the guest room where Rosie had been staying. The door was closed, but I could hear the muffled sounds of what was clearly an intense conversation. I should have called out, should have announced myself like I normally would, but something in the tone of those voices made me stop, made me listen, and then I heard words that changed everything. Warren, you need to tell Miranda the truth. Rosie's voice strained and desperate. My heart stopped. I need more time, Warren replied, his voice lower but full of anguish. I can't break my wife's heart. Not like this. How much more time? Rosie demanded. Kate needs her father, Warren. She needs to know who you really are. The keys slipped from my numb fingers and hit the floor with a metallic jingle, but I barely heard them over the sound of my world crashing down. I do love you, Warren said, and each word was like a knife twisting in my chest. God help me, Rosie. I love you more than I've ever loved your sister. But Miranda, what this will do to her. She deserves to know that Kate is your daughter, Warren. Our daughter. Our daughter. Their daughter? Kate was Warren's daughter. Warren and Rosie had been having an affair. Were having an affair. The baby I'd been caring for, loving like my own, she was theirs. I gripped the wall to keep from falling. My vision tunneled, and for a moment I thought I might actually pass out. The betrayal hit me in waves. First the shock, then the devastating understanding of what this meant. My husband, my sister, the baby I'd fallen in love with while grieving my own lost child, she belonged to them. Kate's crying was getting louder, more insistent. Promise me, Rosie was saying. Promise me you'll tell her soon. I can't keep living this lie, and Kate deserves to have her real family. I promise, Warren said quietly. Just give me a little more time to figure out how to explain this to her. I backed toward the kitchen on shaking legs, my mind racing. Every little sign I'd noticed, every strange moment suddenly made perfect sense. The way they looked at each other, the private conversations, how natural Warren was with Kate, how he seemed to know exactly what she needed, because she was his. My hands were trembling as I reached for a glass and filled it with water. I needed to think. I needed to stay calm. I needed to be smart about this. The rage was building inside me like a pressure cooker, but underneath it was something worse. A grief so profound it threatened to swallow me whole. Not just the betrayal, but the loss. Loss of my marriage, my trust in my sister, the innocent joy I'd felt taking care of Kate. And the timing. God, the timing. They'd been together while I was pregnant, while I was excited about our baby. While I was planning our future as a family. Had they been relieved when I lost the baby? Had it made their situation easier? I drank the water and set the glass down carefully. Then I took a deep breath and called out, loud enough for them to hear down the hall. Hello, Warren? I'm home early. I brought pizza. The arguing stopped immediately. I heard frantic footsteps, hushed whispers, then the sound of the guest room door opening. "Rosie?" I called, surprised at how normal my voice sounded. "Let's eat." They appeared in the kitchen within moments, both of them looking flustered. Rosie was carrying Kate, who had stopped crying but still looked red-faced and upset. Warren's hair was messed up and he kept running his hands through it. "You're home early," Warren said, his voice carefully casual. He wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "Machinery broke down at the plant," I replied, watching them both carefully. Figured it was a sign to spend some time with my family. The word family hung in the air like a challenge. "What kind of pizza?" Rosie asked, bouncing Kate gently. Her cheeks were flushed, and she kept glancing between Warren and me. "Your favorite," I said to Warren, smiling. "Pepperoni and mushroom." It was the same smile I'd given him 1,000 times before, but now there was something different in it. Something that made Warren shift uncomfortably and Rosie's eyes narrow with uncertainty. They knew that I knew something was wrong. They just didn't know how much. That's great, honey," Warren said. "Really thoughtful." "Isn't it?" I said, still smiling as I looked at Kate in Rosie's arms. "I'm just full of surprises today." As I watched them try to act normal, try to pretend they hadn't just been discussing how to tell me about their affair and their child, I felt something cold and calculating settle over me. They thought they could continue lying to my face while I played the fool. They thought they could keep me in the dark about their betrayal while I helped raise their daughter. Well, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Because if Warren and Rosie thought they could destroy my life and continue living in my house, benefiting from my kindness while planning their future together, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I might be heartbroken. I might be devastated, but I wasn't going to be a victim. Not anymore. The next few days were the hardest of my life. I tried to act normal. I really did. I went to work, came home, made dinner conversation, smiled when I was supposed to smile. But inside, I was dying a little more each hour. The worst part was Kate, that innocent, beautiful baby who had brought me so much joy, now felt like a constant reminder of my husband's betrayal. Every time I looked at her, I saw Warren's eyes staring back at me. Every gurgle, every smile felt like a mockery of the child I'd lost. I couldn't bring myself to pick her up anymore. "Miranda?" Rosie said one evening when Kate was fussing and I remained seated at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched dinner. "Could you hold her for a minute while I warm her bottle?" I'm not feeling well," I said, not looking up. "Warren can take her." Warren immediately reached for Kate, and I caught the look that passed between him and Rosie. Concern. Guilt. Something else I couldn't quite identify. "Maybe you should see a doctor," Warren suggested carefully. "You've seemed off lately. Off. That was one way to put it." "I'm fine," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "Just tired. Work has been stressful." But I wasn't fine, and we all knew it. I'd stopped doing the evening routine with Kate that I'd loved so much. No more reading her stories or singing lullabies. I avoided the nursery entirely. When Kate cried at night, I'd lie in bed and let Warren or Rosie handle it. The change in my behavior was obvious, and it was making them nervous. "You know," I said one morning over breakfast, watching Warren feed Kate while Rosie made coffee. "It's interesting how natural you are with her, Warren. Almost like you've done this before." Warren's spoon paused halfway to Kate's mouth. "What do you mean?" "Nothing," I said with a smile that felt like broken glass. "Just an observation." Another time, while Rosie was giving Kate a bath, I commented, "She has such distinctive eyes, doesn't she? So unusual. I wonder where she gets them from." Rosie's hands stilled in the soapy water. Probably from her father." I hummed. "Must be some strong genes." The tension in the house was becoming unbearable. They were walking on eggshells around me, and I was walking through my own life like a ghost. But I needed proof. Real, concrete evidence of what I'd overheard. That's when I remembered the bank statements. For months, I'd been tossing our joint account statements into the kitchen junk drawer without opening them. Warren usually handled reviewing our finances online, and I'd gotten lazy about the paper statements. They were piling up in their sealed envelopes, forgotten. On a Saturday afternoon when Warren had taken Rosie and Kate to the grocery store, family errands as he'd started calling them, I pulled out the entire stack. My hands were shaking as I opened the first envelope, March's statement, then April's, May's, and there it was. Regular withdrawals I didn't recognize. $200 here, $150 there. Cash withdrawals from ATMs near Rosie's old apartment. Restaurant charges for 2 people when Warren had told me he was working late. A charge at a jewelry store on a day I remembered clearly. The day I'd been excited to tell him about a possible promotion at work, but he'd seemed distracted and distant. The timeline was devastating. The withdrawals and mysterious charges started months before Rosie showed up at our door. They continued through my pregnancy. Even during the weeks I was recovering from losing the baby, there were romantic dinner charges and hotel stays I knew nothing about. I was still sitting there when they returned from the store, the evidence scattered across the table like pieces of a broken life. Miranda? Warren's voice seemed to come from very far away. What are you doing? I looked up at him, this man I'd loved and trusted and built a life with, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. Learning the truth, I said quietly. Rosie appeared in the doorway behind him, Kate on her hip, and her face went white when she saw the bank statements. I think, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. It's time we had a conversation. The silence that followed was deafening. Warren stood frozen in the doorway, grocery bags still in his hands, while Rosie clutched Kate tighter, her knuckles white against the baby's pink outfit. Miranda, Warren started, his voice carefully controlled. What's all this? I picked up one of the bank statements and held it up. This is our joint account activity for the past 8 months, Warren. Very interesting reading. His face went pale. Behind him, Rosie took a step backward. I can explain, Warren began. Can you? I interrupted, standing up slowly. Can you explain the $200 cash withdrawal on March 15th? The same day you told me you were working late but really took my sister to Romano's for dinner? Warren's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Or maybe you can explain this charge, I continued, picking up another statement. The jewelry store. March 22nd. What did you buy her, Warren? What kind of gift says thank you for helping me betray my wife? My sister's face had gone from white to green. Kate, sensing the tension, began to whimper. The funny thing is, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word, I wasn't even looking for this. I was just trying to organize our finances, and I found months of evidence of your affair. Months, Warren. This isn't some recent mistake. This is a deliberate, ongoing betrayal. Miranda, please, Rosie finally spoke, her voice shaking. Please what? I snapped, finally letting some of my rage show. Please pretend I didn't overhear you two planning how to tell me that Kate is Warren's daughter? Please keep pretending that you came to my door as a desperate single mother when you've actually been sleeping with my husband for months? Kate started crying in earnest now, but none of us moved to comfort her. Suddenly, something shifted in Rosie's expression. The tears stopped. The guilty, apologetic look disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. You know what, Miranda? She said, her voice dropping to a sneer. I'm actually glad you finally found out. Warren stared at her in shock. Rosie, what are you doing? I'm tired of pretending, she continued, bouncing Kate with an almost mocking gentleness. Tired of acting like the poor, desperate single mother? You want the truth? Here it is. Warren chose me. He chose us. The whole sob story at your door? That was Warren's idea. Surprise! I didn't lose my apartment or my job. I quit my job and gave up my lease because Warren wanted me here. He wanted to be close to his daughter every day. I felt like I'd been slapped. You planned this whole thing? Of course we did, Rosie said with a cruel smile. Did you really think it was all just a coincidence? The poor little Rosie showing up at your door with a mystery baby? Warren and I had been together for months by then. We needed a way for me to move in without making you suspicious. Warren was staring at her in horror, as if seeing her true nature for the first time. Rosie, stop. Why should I stop? She snapped. She already knows everything anyway. Might as well tell her how pathetically easy it was to fool her. You believed every word, Miranda, the whole helpless single mother act. I felt like I'd been slapped. Stealing my— Oh, please, Rosie interrupted, rolling her eyes. Don't act so surprised. You were always so smug, Miranda. Perfect marriage, perfect house, perfect little life. Well, guess what? It wasn't so perfect after all, was it? Rosie, stop, Warren said, his voice filled with warning, but she was on a roll now, years of hidden resentment pouring out. You know what the best part was? How easy it was. Warren practically fell into my lap. A few late-night conversations when you were at work, a little attention, and boom, he was mine. You're my sister, I whispered, barely able to comprehend what I was hearing. And you're naive, she shot back. Did you really think Warren was happy with you? He told me all about how you could never get pregnant, how you were always so focused on having a baby that you forgot to be a wife. That's not true, Warren said quickly, but Rosie wasn't finished. And when you finally did get pregnant, she continued with vicious satisfaction, you were so pathetic, so excited about your little baby. Well, I have news for you, Miranda. I could have put the whole bag of peanuts in your food so you'd go away with that child of yours. She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening as she realized what she'd just said. The room went dead silent. Warren's face went white. What did you just say? I felt the world tilt on its axis. What did you say about peanuts? Rosie's defiant mask cracked, panic flooding her features. I didn't mean. You put peanuts in my food, I said slowly, the horrible truth dawning on me. You hurt me, on purpose. Miranda, Rosie tried to explain. You caused me to lose my baby, I screamed, lunging toward her. Warren caught me, his arms around my waist, but I fought against him. Let me go. She deliberately hurt me. She hurt me and my baby. Oh my God, Warren breathed, staring at Rosie in horror. Rosie, tell me you didn't do that. Rosie clutched Kate tighter, tears streaming down her face again, but now they looked like tears of fear, not guilt. You don't understand. I already had Kate. I couldn't let you have a baby too. Warren would have chosen your child over us. I had to protect what we had. You had to protect what you had, I repeated, that, my voice rising to a shriek. By causing me to lose my baby? It wasn't supposed to be that bad, Rosie said desperately. I just wanted to make you a little sick. I didn't know you'd lose the baby. I didn't know. You knew exactly what you were doing. I broke free from Warren's grip and advanced on her. You've known about my allergy my entire life. You knew peanuts could seriously harm me. Warren's face had gone completely white, and he was staring at Rosie like he'd never seen her before. You caused us to lose our baby? Miranda's baby. That was going to be my child, too. Warren, please, Rosie started. You made my wife lose our child, Warren said, his voice barely a whisper. I thought it was just a terrible accident. I held Miranda while she cried, thinking it was some cruel twist of fate, but you did it on purpose. The room spun around me. Everything made sense now. The timing, that Rosie's strange behavior after I announced my pregnancy, the mysterious contamination of food I'd made myself. My sister hadn't just stolen my husband. She had deliberately caused me to lose my child. Get out, I said quietly. What? Warren asked, but his voice sounded distant, shocked. Get out of my house, I repeated louder this time. Both of you, take Kate and get out. Miranda, you can't just... Rosie started. I can, I said, my voice like steel. This is my house, my name is on the deed, and I want both of you out of my sight before I call the police and have you arrested for what you did. I looked at Warren, this man who I thought I knew, who I'd loved and trusted. You chose her. You made your choice. Now live with it. Live with knowing you fell in love with someone who would deliberately hurt me. Miranda, Warren tried to speak, but I cut him off. 1 hour, I said. Pack whatever you need and leave. I turned and walked toward the stairs, my legs somehow carrying me even though I felt like I was falling apart. Miranda, wait, Warren called after me. But I didn't stop. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and closed the door behind me. Almost immediately, I heard Warren's voice from downstairs, and he was shouting. How could you do that? His voice carried clearly through the house. How could you cause us to lose our baby and let me think it was an accident? Warren, please let me explain, Rosie's voice pleading. Explain what? That you deliberately hurt my wife? That you hurt Miranda and caused our child to... and let me think it was just bad luck? It wasn't like that, Rosie screamed. Then what was it like, Rosie? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you deliberately caused an innocent baby to... because you didn't want the competition. I could hear Kate crying again, probably scared by all the shouting. "I did it for us," Rosie cried. "For our family. Miranda would have taken you away from me if she'd had your baby." "So you deliberately caused my child to be lost instead?" Warren's voice broke. "Do you have any idea what these past months have been like? Watching Miranda blame herself for what happened? Holding her while she cried herself to sleep, thinking she'd somehow caused her own baby's death?" "I never meant for it to go that far. You put peanuts in her food knowing she could be seriously hurt. You knew exactly what you were doing." I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the man I'd loved discover the true nature of the woman he'd chosen over me. Part of me felt vindicated that he was finally seeing Rosie for what she really was. But mostly, I just felt empty. They continued arguing downstairs, Warren's voice getting more disgusted and angry with each exchange, Rosie growing more desperate in her justifications. Finally, I heard footsteps on the stairs, the sounds of frantic packing, and then the front door slamming. Through the bedroom window, I watched Warren carry suitcases to his car while Rosie followed with Kate's things. Even from here, I could see they were still arguing. Whatever they'd thought their future would look like, this wasn't it. But as I watched them drive away, I realized something. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and cold reality. I quickly learned that knowing the truth and proving it were two very different things. When I sat across from my attorney, Margaret Owens, and told her about Rosie's confession, she listened with sympathy but gave me the harsh facts. Without physical evidence or independent witnesses, it would be nearly impossible to pursue criminal charges, she explained gently. Rosie could claim she was just saying hurtful things in anger. Even Warren's testimony about what he heard might not be enough. "So she gets away with what she did," I said bitterly. "I didn't say that," Margaret replied. "We focus on what we can prove. The affair is well documented in your bank records. Warren's paternity of Kate can be established through DNA testing. We can pursue adultery in the divorce proceedings, and there are grounds for significant emotional distress claims. It wasn't the justice I wanted, but it was something." The divorce proceedings were brutal. Warren didn't contest the adultery charges. He couldn't, given the mountain of evidence. The DNA test confirmed what we all knew. Kate was his daughter. But when it came to Rosie's confession about the poisoning, Warren's lawyer advised him to claim spousal privilege even though we weren't married anymore, and the conversations were privileged family discussions made in duress. The legal system, I learned, was designed for evidence and proof, not just truth and justice. But I fought anyway. I fought for every penny, every asset, every scrap of dignity I could salvage from the wreckage of my life. The house is mine, the joint savings, Warren's retirement account. I took everything I was legally entitled to, and then some. Rosie, meanwhile, had disappeared. No criminal charges were filed against her, and she'd moved out of state with Kate. Warren followed them, of course. He'd made his choice, and even after learning what Rosie was capable of, he stayed with her. Our parents had died years ago in a car accident, so there was no family to turn to, no one to tell about what Rosie had done. It was just the two of us sisters, and she'd burned that bridge to ash. But I had something they didn't expect. I had the will to rebuild. 2 years later, I was living in Portland, Oregon, 800 miles away from the life I'd lost. I'd sold the house. Every room held too many memories anyway, and used the money to start over completely. I'd always been good with numbers and quality control, so I started my own small consulting business, helping small manufacturers improve their processes. It was satisfying work that kept me busy and, more importantly, successful. Success, I'd learned, was its own form of justice. I bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood, painted the walls colors I actually liked, and filled it with furniture that was mine and mine alone. I adopted a rescue dog named Scout, took pottery classes on weekends, and slowly, carefully, learned how to be happy again. I dated occasionally, but I was in no hurry. I'd learned the value of knowing someone thoroughly before trusting them with my heart. The betrayal had left scars, but it had also given me wisdom. I thought about Rosie sometimes, wondered if she ever regretted what she'd done. I thought about Warren too, and whether he ever looked at Kate and remembered the child he'd lost. But mostly, I tried not to think about them at all. They had made their choices and were living with the consequences. I was doing the same. My life was smaller now, but it was entirely mine. No lies, no deception, no one pretending to love me while planning my destruction. There was peace in that authenticity, even if it had come at such a terrible price. I thought I was done with both of them forever. I was wrong. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in March, almost 3 years to the day after I'd discovered their betrayal. I was making dinner, pasta with vegetables, simple and satisfying, when my phone rang. It's a number that I don't recognize, but something made me answer it anyway. Hello? Miranda. Warren's voice, older somehow, weary in a way I'd never heard before. I nearly hung up immediately, but curiosity kept me on the line. What do you want, Warren? I need to tell you something. About Rosie. My hand tightened on the phone. I don't want to hear about your perfect life together. It's not perfect, he said quietly. Miranda, she lost a baby, 6 months along, and then the doctors found cancer. I sat down heavily at my kitchen table, the pasta forgotten. What? Stage 3 cervical cancer, Warren continued, his voice breaking slightly. The doctors say the pregnancy probably accelerated its growth. She's not doing well, Miranda. I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window, trying to process what he was telling me. Rosie was sick, dying, maybe. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because she's been asking for you, Warren said. She wants to see you, to talk to you. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. She wants to see me? After what she did? I know it's a lot to ask. It's not a lot to ask, Warren. It's impossible. She deliberately caused me to lose my child. She destroyed my life. And now what? I'm supposed to feel sorry for her? She's dying, Miranda, he said. Good, I said, and meant it. Maybe that's karma finally catching up with her. The line went quiet for a long moment. I want you to know that I've been carrying this guilt for 3 years. Every time I look at Kate, I think about the child we lost, the child she caused us to lose. I don't know how to live with that, he said. That's not my problem anymore, I said firmly. I know it's not, but Miranda, she's suffering, really suffering, and I can't help thinking that maybe this is how it was supposed to end. I closed my eyes, feeling the old anger rise up in my chest, but underneath it was something else. Not forgiveness. I would never forgive Rosie for what she'd done, but maybe closure. Where are you? I asked. Sacramento, at UC Davis Medical Center. I thought about my life in Portland, my business, my house, my carefully constructed peace. Did I really want to risk all of that to see the woman who would destroy a thing I'd once held dear? I had a choice to make. I could stay here in my safe, peaceful life and let Rosie face her illness without me. Or I could face the woman who had deliberately caused me to lose my child and finally say everything I'd never had the chance to say. I sat there for a long time, thinking about justice and forgiveness and closure. And then I realized something. I didn't owe Rosie anything. Not my presence, not my forgiveness, not even my anger. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. My baby would never get to grow up, never get to live the life that was stolen away. Why should Rosie get the comfort of my presence during her darkest moments? Why should she get to unburden herself of guilt that she should carry forever? The next morning, I didn't book a flight to Sacramento. Instead, I went to work, walked Scout in the park, and made dinner in my peaceful kitchen. I lived my life. The life I had rebuilt from the ashes of the one she'd destroyed. That was my justice. That was my victory. Living well while she faced her struggles alone with only Warren and the weight of what she'd done for company. 5 years later, the updates came sporadically over the years, usually through mutual acquaintances or social media glimpses that I couldn't entirely avoid. But word has a way of finding you, even when you don't want it to. Rosie survived the cancer, but the treatments left her unable to have more children. The woman who had deliberately caused me to lose my baby would never be able to give Kate a sibling. She and Warren were still together, but from what I heard through the grapevine, they were miserable. The weight of what she'd done hung over their relationship like a toxic cloud. Warren stayed, but friends said he looked like a man serving a life sentence. They barely spoke to each other anymore, going through the motions of a family while drowning in guilt and resentment. Rosie had apparently tried reaching out to me multiple times over the years. Letters I returned unopened, calls I never answered, messages through old friends that I ignored. She wanted forgiveness from her only family, the absolution that might ease the bitterness eating away at her soul. She never got it. When she finally recovered her health, that familiar jealousy and spite returned with a vengeance. She'd grown even more bitter, more resentful, more consumed by what others had that she couldn't obtain. And then she learned about my new life. I'd married David 3 years after moving to Portland. He was everything Warren hadn't been. Honest, kind, successful in his own right as the owner of a thriving architectural firm. Our wedding was small but perfect, held in the garden we'd cultivated together. A year later, I gave birth to twins, Emma and James. Healthy, beautiful babies who filled our home with laughter and light. After everything I'd been through, these children felt like the ultimate gift from the universe. The pictures must have made their way through social media because Warren called me for the first time in years. "Congratulations," he said, his voice hollow. "The babies are beautiful." "Thank you," I replied carefully. "Rosie saw the photos," he continued. She's not taking it well," he said. I could imagine. While I was celebrating the miracle of new life, Rosie was trapped in her barren marriage, watching from afar as I lived the life she'd tried to steal from me. "That's not my problem anymore, Warren. I know. I just thought you should know that she's gotten worse, more angry, more obsessed with you and what you have." He said, "Are you warning me about something?" "Maybe. I don't know. She talks about you constantly, about how unfair it is that you got everything while she lost everything. She doesn't understand that she did this to herself." I looked through my kitchen window at David teaching Emma how to water the tomato plants, while James napped in his stroller nearby. My husband caught my eye and smiled, that warm, genuine smile that had first made me fall in love with him. "Warren," I said quietly, "I need you to understand something. I didn't get everything despite what Rosie did to me. I got everything because I chose to build a life instead of destroying one. That's the difference between us. I know that, but she doesn't, and I'm afraid of what that might mean," he said. "Then that's something you need to handle. But Warren, this is the last conversation we're ever going to have. I have a family to protect now, and I won't let her poison this life the way she poisoned my last one." I hung up and immediately called our security company to upgrade our home system. Because I knew Rosie. I knew that her bitterness and jealousy were like acid, eating away at everything they touched. She'd destroyed her own life trying to steal mine, and now that I'd found happiness again, the children she could never have, the loving marriage she'd never achieved, the success she'd never earned, her resentment would be unbearable. But this time I was ready for her. The justice wasn't in her suffering, though she was clearly suffering. The justice was in my joy, in the family I'd built, in the love that surrounded me every day. She'd tried to end my story years ago. Instead, she'd only made the next chapter even more beautiful.
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.